Alrighty, what is going on, fam? Welcome to the Get More Client Show. So excited to have you. As always, here, Alex Schlinsky from Prospecting on Demand, and my co-host Brian Downard. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing excellent. Got my new POD shirt on,
Yeah,
Rob.
we got new shirts today. Go fast and break things 1% better. If you're alarmed that we're not wearing the culture shirts, don't worry. We will be back next week and we'll be wearing the culture shirts. But I'm, as you know, always repping the hat, always repping the culture.
We'll see how my
So excited.
laundry does.
So excited to talk about today's topic. It's going to be a really interesting Get More Client show all the time in the marketing space. Whether you are brand new or you're a veteran of the industry, people love pivoting. They love new ideas. A lot of people look at marketing as like this incredibly challenging puzzle, and they love the idea of strategizing on how to help new markets or uncovered markets or diamond in the rough markets and niches where they can create massive growth and opportunity, not just for the clients, but of course for themselves as well. So we're always getting questions about underrated marketing niches and all that kind of jazz. And we're going to share several with you here today. And if you are watching in YouTube or listening on Spotify or live on our Facebook group, Seven Figure Culture, we'd love to hear from you. What are some underrated marketing niches you've encountered? It's always interesting to hear what the audience has to say, and we always appreciate you hitting those like or subscribe buttons. Helps us a ton. Before we dive into it, obviously, we have to set the stage a little bit. We have to talk about how you even choose a niche in the first place, what makes a good niche, and red flags to avoid. So, Brian, why don't I kick it over to you? Let's talk about how we choose a niche in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to get into this. And again, today will be sort of educational and conversational, so a little bit of a combination of past episodes we've done. I think you're going to really like this, though. So, got a couple of notes here. Basically, to pick an audience, I really like to say that it should be at the intersection of a couple of things. There's four elements to consider. What you actually know, like where do you have results, ideally already? What do you actually like doing? So, what are you good at? What actually gets you excited and motivated? Where do you already have connections? That one's critical. Usually creates low-hanging fruit opportunities, client opportunities in a new space. And then what makes good money? Because if you're picking an industry that doesn't make good money, again, some we will talk about today, you might think, wait, does that actually make good money? Will surprise you, you can focus on, but it's a combination of those four. So what you know, what you like, where you have connections, and what actually makes money. If we can kind of find the perfect combination of those four, now it may not be right away, but that is where you can start.
Sure.
I would also challenge you to be specific as you're choosing a niche. To me, just gyms isn't specific enough. We need to go deeper. So if it's a gym, what type of gym? Maybe a UFC gym, maybe F45 studios or CrossFit. Like go really sub-specific and sub-niche down because one, that will speak to that audience, and two, it won't handicap you from working with other people. You'll still have people coming and asking for your help within that industry, which you get to decide whether or not you actually want to work with them. I would say niches and industries where there is lower competition, and we've heard us talk about in the past that there's an abundance of opportunity, so I don't want you to worry yourself too much about competition, but understand market sophistication. And there are industries like real estate that has a higher sophistication and understanding of marketing and what it entails and a higher expectation for what you need to produce results. So just have that good understanding before you go in there. Don't worry too much about competition, but again, we're going to talk about underrated and some untapped niches today, so hopefully we can find a little diamond in the rough here for you. And then also being open to opportunities as they present themselves on your journey. Too many people try and think they have to marry a niche and it scares them, where it's really just taking action in a direction, and then by stepping into that forest, your path will be revealed through the trees, but you're not always going to be able to see that path by just standing and looking at the forest. You got to dive in and start somewhere. But that, I say, in a nutshell, is how you can start to pick a niche. And that was pretty damn good. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back because I felt good about that one.
Yeah, I
But
give you some flowers there. I would agree on everything you noted. I also want to remind you guys in terms of like taking action, right? Going fast and breaking things is going to create the niche that you end up wanting to work in long term. For me specifically in my industry, I worked with attorneys, which is my now long-term niche. I worked with hobby shops. I worked with musicians. I worked with plumbers. I worked with gyms. I did a bunch of different niches just to try to figure out what was the ideal one. Brian talks about it all the time. We're playing an infinite game. So you don't have to have the niche right now that's going to be the niche you have in 10 years. And you're also always allowed to pivot. Remember, we talk about vertical scaling, which is repeatability, predictability. That's our goal. So you pick a niche, you repeat it, you predictably grow from it. You can also cap it, ziplock that bag, keep your clients, and try something else. The idea of running your own business is it's your choice. And I think that's a really important one. And Brian also noted like what you know, what you like, etc. I think the what you like scale should be considered less because sometimes it's hard for people to end up finding like the passion they have for other things. If your passion is just in marketing in general, consider building that vertical scaling to pay your bills, make the money you want, and then go find a bunch of stuff that you really like doing. I think that's really valuable. In terms of what makes a good niche, I think that's a really important question before we continue into the idea of underrated niches. Number one, they're already a business that is doing well, and you're just going to help them do better. Helping winners win more is such a key element in successful marketing because when you're helping losers try to win, unfortunately, what happens is you just get blamed, and that's really how it works. Like in terms of following up, for example, obviously we've talked a lot about having individual sales agents and having automations and doing a comprehensive conversion-based system. But the reality is companies that can just take leads and then convert those leads into clients are always going to be better for you because you're going to have lower cost, less complexity, and they're going to be able to succeed. And I think that's really key. They're also willing to hire other people in their business as they grow. If they don't have a scaling mindset, you will naturally have a cap. Now, that's not a requirement. It just means they'll be better for you long term, and you can be asking these questions to your prospects to identify whether or not they want to scale or if they just want to stay a three-man team. They actually have the budget, obviously, to hire you, and they don't haggle you on everything. If they're haggling you right off the bat from the front on the first call, it's going to be that way the whole time, and you're going to have a PETA client, a pain in the ass. No one wants that. They're actually interested in a long-term relationship. We like to use the term partnerships, not marketing provider, because that indicates our goal of working with someone long-term and building their business with them. When you win, we win. That's the goal. Their personality will be in line with yours, right? This is certainly not a requirement, but it makes the experience a lot better and easier when you actually vibe with the person versus butting heads all the time. We don't want contentious relationships. We want building bonds and growing together relationships. They are more concerned about doing the right things rather than doing it cheap or fast. There's a difference between inexpensive and cheap. A lot of people will tell you this marketing company is cheaper than you, and you say exactly that company is cheaper because they have less quality. That's the key here. And then lastly, they're actually receptive to your advice, right? You don't question what your doctor tells you because they're the expert, so you do exactly what they say. Have you understand that you're the marketing expert. The people that are hiring you need to feel comfortable in following your advice. So now that you understand what makes a good niche, how to choose your niche, what are red flags to avoid, Brian, before we dive into some of these underrated niches?
Yeah, and I would like to add that some of the things Alex just shared or what I'm about to share aren't necessarily niche specific. It could be in any niche, but you want to consider these personality traits, characteristics of the people you're going to be working with regardless of the industry. But let's definitely talk about some red flags related to niches in general and around the niche you actually ultimately pick. So Alex touched on this a little bit, but they want discounts in advance of getting work done. A lot of industries, specifically lawyers, because they get paid after you get a result, you want to be careful that unless you've got a really clear pay per lead, pay per performance model, which we are teaching in the program now, that you aren't stepping on their toes there, because again, they're going to probably want certain things done up front, or that might be the expectation. So understand how your industry gets paid, how they expect to be paid, and pay their service providers. Again, in restaurants, it's a weird thing where it's one of the only businesses besides attorneys where you get paid after the fact, right? You get the product first. So just make sure they aren't expecting you to do free work in advance. That's not how this type of marketing works, in my opinion. I would say people who have unrealistic goals and expectations, especially around the timeline, that is a massive red flag. If you're telling them or if they're telling you even that their average sales cycle is 6 to 12 months, and they're complaining to you after 3 months that the leads aren't good enough, then they're a terrible client. Again, having the wrong expectation for how results are supposed to actually happen.
But Brian, I didn't make $30,000 in 3 weeks. This isn't working.
We get this a lot. And again, it's probably misalignment of expectations. And if you have someone doing your selling for you and your fulfillment separate, they have to be in alignment of what's being promised versus what's actually being executed on, or you end up losing clients and they're frustrated. People who are just bad at communication or unorganized, they become a pain in the ass. People who pay the least expect the most and will be the biggest pain and time suck on your your mentality, your resources, your soul, all of those things they'll take from you, the people who expect the most pay and the least. So just be aware of those ones as well. In that same vein, control freaks, people who nitpick, you are the professional. You need to be willing to put your foot down and not just do what they want, or as we've said on this show before, overcompensate for a lack of you actually creating real results with your core offer by just doing a bunch of random shit for them. Of course, I'll do your design and your logo and your business cards and start an entirely new line of products for you, but I'm actually just being paid to do Facebook ads. Yeah, exactly. So you got to be careful that you're not having them go outside of that SLA or being control freaks or just over asking and overstepping their boundaries. If they're not currently spending money on advertising, if you're in an industry that totally relies on referrals only and they don't spend money on advertising, you got to know that, because that's not a good industry to be involved in, because they're not willing to go past that mindset that they have. I would say people who are too desperate or eager to start as well is a red flag to me, versus someone who is cautiously, not necessarily having to weigh their options, but if someone's coming to you and really desperate for you to save them in that same vein, then again, that's a massive red flag. Also, they're a startup with no income or proven offer. This is probably the single biggest red flag, and I've fallen victim to this as well. If you are working with a brand who does not have a validated offer, it means they don't actually sell the thing that they're hoping to sell, product, service, whatever, and you're coming in there as the marketing expert to help them market it, they're going to blame you when their product fails and bombs, because there's a mismatch in the product, and the audience in the market didn't want it, right? They're trying to create demand instead of supply it, and they're blaming you because they had a shitty idea or a shitty offer. So Absolutely. Be really careful if they don't have something validated yet. And then another, probably second to that, being another second biggest red flag, be a bad online reputation. If you see that they are clearly just running their business like shit, they're going to make your life a million times more difficult, not only in how they treat you, but how they treat the leads and opportunities that you send them, and they're going to wonder why they didn't close because they're a shitty business owner, and then you get blamed and lose the client anyways. So hopefully some of those ideas we brought up here on what to look for and avoid in your niche and or the clients you work with in your niche were helpful. But now I'm curious, because this is Alex's brainchild here, what are some of the thing you're here for, what are some of the underrated niches and things people could be looking to?
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this. Like I said, we get this question all the time about underrated niches and diamond in the rough. And I think a lot of the times the modus operandi that Brian and I have are like, stay focused and don't worry about that. But then when we get to deep thinking opportunity and really like consider what there are potentially diamond in the rough opportunities, and we even made a post in this in our group recently just to gather intel from everyone else. There's a few that really stuck out to us that I think would be extremely valuable for you to consider. Now, again, you have to consider the opportunity cost, if it's worth trying this out. Maybe in terms of the 80-20 principle, there's value in taking some time in terms of advertising this new service or prospecting this new service to try out these niches. But let's dive in first with the first underrated niche, which is funeral homes. Now, a little bit of backstory. My father was in the funeral industry for over 20 years, so I do have a good amount of experience here. And to be a little bit morbid, unfortunately, the way that human beings are, we all die. That's just the reality of it, right? Not to get too existential on you, but I think it's just a matter of fact, which means what Brian was just talking about is there's always a demand for funeral homes. No matter what, every human being on this planet will pass away, and thus there will need a funeral. I mean, that's the pretty, societal model that we go through. People have funerals. I think a lot of people, especially in the younger generation, have no idea how expensive funerals are. There's actually like insurance policies solely related to people being able to pay for their funerals so that it doesn't just fall on their children, their family, etc. In the United States, there's an average of 2.5 million funerals a year. It's an alarming statistic. It's scary to hear that, but it's important to know. The average cost of a funeral, which ranges very drastically per state, like I think off the top of my head, Hawaii is the most expensive, like with an average of like 14 grand. Why that's the case, I do not know, but I did some research before this call, and that's what it was saying on these websites. But the average cost is around $8,000 to $10,000 per funeral home, not to mention on top of all the other stuff that you have to consider, like the wake and the catering and all that, everything included, which a lot of the funeral homes have strategic partnerships with. Will it be like, hey, your dad is going to get buried here, and we are going to also provide you with our recommended provider for catering afterwards for the wake, etc. Very common strategic partnerships as well, which makes the opportunity more financially beneficial for the funeral home themselves. Here's the simple words that you need to hear. Dying is expensive. That's the reality. Dying is expensive. Consumer Price Index says that funeral costs have risen over 220% in the last 30 years, and that is only going to increase. If you consider in the last 30 years that the population of the world has only grown, obviously more people are going to die as well. That is just the reality of it. So that average of 2.5 million funerals per year, maybe in 5-10 years will be 3 million, 3.5 million. If you consider that, funeral homes are absolutely a perfect underrated niche. Most of them do absolutely zero marketing at all. Maybe you see sometimes they're on like a billboard or like on a local bench. But these people are good people, helping people at the most challenging time of their life. And it's really important that they're supported in the marketing world as well. So that would be my recommendation on that. But Brian, maybe you have something to add as well.
Yeah, just from some clients I hear stepping into the space or have had conversations with people in the space, something that's important, and I don't know the exact terminology here, so if someone knows, you can correct me, but actually paying for and planning your funeral in advance. Again, morbid, but people who don't want their family to have the actual burden or expense of their funeral will, as they near the end of their life, go pay for that in advance. And that apparently, and from what I've heard from people researching, is what funeral homes are actually interested in selling people. So
absolutely, and to add to that, Brian, this is also a very religious thing as well. Jews, Christians, Muslims, a lot of them have their own religious sect of funeral homes, where they will pay for burial sites for their family members to be next to each other like 10, 20, 30 years before they're actually buried. It's a very, very common thing, and that is a very valuable marketing tactic. Brian, let's talk about the second underrated niche.
Cool. I know this one well because I spent a lot of time there not only getting engaged, but losing my wedding ring like a month after my wedding, which is the jewelers.
Not to mention you're a big watch fan as well.
I'm a big watch fan. It's funny because we're kind of shooting myself in the foot here as we're going to say this is an untapped niche. I like to buy watches used online. Typically, you can just find a better selection. But I know with things like engagement rings, for example, that's an expensive purchase. That's much more tangible. People want to see it before they actually go plop down that kind of money. So Alex, kindly enough, did some research. And basically at jewelers, prices obviously will range from cheap things like $40, but upwards of $10, $20, $50,000, depending on what type of things that they're selling, the jewelry, diamonds, etc. But on average, people are spending around $800 each time they visit. And like we said, a good indicator of a good niche is having high lifetime value, having customers who spend a lot of money, because you have to acquire less leads, less clients for your clients to break even. I love the analogy of like, if you want to sell $1,000 a month marketing service, as just an example, again, I would probably want to charge more and provide more value. But if you were working with a pizza place whose main product was slices, they sold $2 slices all day long. How many $2 slices, it's a hypothetical question because I know the answer, do you have to sell just to break even? Like how many leads do you have to generate? How many people do you have to bring in versus if you just sold 1 or 2 people, helped your jeweler to sell 1 or 2 people, buy an engagement ring, they just paid for your retainer for a year. So I think there's a massive opportunity there. Again, also with idiots like myself who lose their ring and have to go rebuy it and get it insured. So food for thought, if you don't have your jewelry insured, do that because it's worth it.
Proud of myself for not losing my ring for over 5 years. Let's go.
Yeah, and then I would say too, also the repeat customers as well. I trust the jeweler that I go to now explicitly, even though I don't buy watches from them. I do go there and I will have watch straps replaced. I've been there a couple times to have jewelry cleaned for my wife, and they're the person I go back to. So the customer lifetime value is extremely high when you have that trust.
Absolutely.
Cool. So one of Alex's favorite things, I'm going to kick it over to you now for an untapped industry that I don't think anyone saw coming or will see coming.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting one. It's card shops and hobby shops. When I was younger, I used to collect basketball cards and football cards religiously. Also, embarrassingly enough, Magic the Gathering and Pokemon cards, but we don't have to get into that. Side note on it, by the way, if you guys have seen during COVID, Pokemon cards have risen in value like absolutely insane. If you have an OG Charizard, by the way, just first edition from when you were like 5, 6, 7 years old, just like somewhere in the garage, that card could be worth like $30,000 to $40,000. Just consider that. But anyways, we're specifically talking about card shops and hobby shops in general. Obviously, the pandemic, COVID, has changed the landscape of how people are entertained, how people communicate, social bonds that are created. A lot more people are staying at home, and thus hobbies in general increased in value significantly. Now, the card hobby had died out a little bit. Died out is not the right word, but essentially has lessened in value over the last 20 years than it was prior, because there's so many other things that are pulling our attention away, like iPhones and video games and all that stuff. But back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 90s specifically, the card hobby was really on a rise. And then it's kind of steadily just stayed the same or gone down a bit. But during COVID, it had an unprecedented rise to become the most profitable it has ever been before. It's a huge niche hobby. You might think like, oh, those are for children. That is absolutely not the case. Card and hobby shops are incredibly popular for people of all age ranges, including children as well. Prices have drastically skyrocketed for rookie cards, autograph cards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a big basketball fan, you might have known, obviously, last year, Zion Williamson, probably the biggest rookie to come into the NBA since LeBron James. Some of his cards sell online for like a crazy amount of money. 2-3 years ago, Luka Doncic came from Slovenia, played at Real Madrid, now plays for the Dallas Mavericks. If we want to talk basketball on this show, I'd be so happy, but we're not going to do that. But his rookie cards sell for like several $1,000s for a card, a piece of plastic, or which is literally insane. StockX, which is one of these hobby shop websites, which in terms of other hobbies, by the way, selling shoes online, massive hobby. StockX is one of the premier places to buy shoes. There's also like sneakers.com and stuff. That's not really what I was going to talk about, but there is an underrated niche there as well. Per StockX, a hobby box of 2019-2020 Panini Prism, which has the rookie cards of Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, and a couple other very popular rookies. It's a popular product for football or basketball. It was going for about $400 per box in January of 2020 before COVID. Literally 6 months later, during COVID, in June, that box went for over $1,000. You can find that same box now for over $1,500 to $2,000 because Zion Williamson is about to end his second year in the NBA and had one of the greatest seasons since Shaquille O'Neal. It's pretty impressive. So that is a really unique and interesting underrated niche. Let's talk about another one, Brian. What do you got?
I wasn't about to let you go down that rabbit hole. All right, so this is an interesting one. One of our most successful and profitable clients was actually in the plumbing space. Now, plumbers have a very specific, obviously, in-demand service when people need it, but they are terrible at marketing. And plumbing jobs and repair damage can be thousands and thousands of dollars. I had my sink back up, and I thought I would be smart and try and go fix it myself. It doesn't work that well. Had to call a plumber, came out the next day, charged me $400. But again, it's not just because of the ease of it was for him to fix it. It's his knowledge of doing it and the time to come do it quickly, right? The emergency service. So there's actually a lot of profit in this industry. You have to be willing to know what to charge, and it can't be a crazy absurd number. But if you have the right pricing, and I think, not to name any names, but I believe the person I'm thinking of was pricing right under $1,000 per month.
Correct.
For lead gen and basically Google Map Pack listings to rank them higher locally. And his clients were getting results, and he was retaining them for many years, and he got mostly thousands of plumbers around the country, and now it's a multi-million-dollar agency. So crazy that one of the niches I would consider probably not touching is extremely profitable. And in that same vein, water damage, mold remediation, fire damage, like Larry's probably like, don't tell anyone, it's the secret. That's a good one as well, right? That's a great one. Lots of money in that space. I'm going to share one more, Alex, before I kick it over to you for the last one. Funny enough, one of the guys here watching will love that you bring this up. He might be screaming, no, don't share the secret with anyone else either. But the industry I worked in for a while was furniture stores, specifically patio furniture and barbecues. Now, patio furniture is fucking expensive. It's really expensive. People will spend $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 plus on their furniture sets, not to count the grills, which $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and outdoor kitchens. Like, I had no idea that industry existed, but through a college friend, well, now a great long-term friend, was introduced to this industry where I grew a multiple six-figure agency helping and supporting retailers of furniture, patio furniture, and grills. I made a killing there, and it's something I think that's a hard industry to get into, but severely underserved and has a lot of opportunity and money because they're definitely a little behind the eight ball in terms of technology, and you digital marketers can surely help them. So why don't you bring us home out with the last one to consider?
Let's close this out here with an underrated one, maybe less underrated than the rest, but I think it's a good juxtaposition to a very common niche. A lot of people want to work in the car repair niche, in car dealerships, local, used, obviously like the retail, large retailers. But what about boat sales? What about membership clubs? Now, obviously membership clubs covers a ton, wide range of niches. We're not really going to discuss those like golf courses and such. Just boats itself. I did a little bit of research before this call, partially because my brother is buying a boat, which Brian, I didn't even mention to you. But boat sales are a really profitable niche and industry, and they sell for, similar to what cars sell for, and in some cases, a lot more. Like a simple sales boat can start around like $12,000 to $12,500. Pontoon boats, bow rider boats will cost anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000. Deck boats between $20,000 and $50,000. Fishing boats between $25,000 and $100,000. And of course, we're not even talking about yachts, which are like millions of dollars, obviously. You can expect to pay anywhere in a membership club where you don't own the boat, but you can have access to boats, anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 or $7,000 for a one-time membership fee. And then ongoing expenses will typically fall between $195 to $600 per month. And if you consider that that's a recurring service, it's an incredibly valuable niche where you can help these people market to find more people that maybe don't want to spend all that money on a boat to buy it, but they do want to spend a little bit of money to have it for once a week, once a month type of thing. It's pretty incredible to consider. On a global scale, about 70% of the population lives within about 5 kilometers of closest water, meaning there's a huge amount of people that have the interest or ability to either one, buy a boat, and for those that cannot afford a boat, are interested in having a membership to a boat club. These are some of the really unique and interesting underrated marketing niches we wanted to share with you today. Again, just to recap them: funeral homes, jewelers, card and hobby shops, plumbers, boat sales and membership clubs, and of course furniture stores as well. Brian, thank you so much for joining us as usual in the Get More Client Show. Everyone out there, we always appreciate your time and we're grateful for you. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like or love button, drop us a subscribe and a comment, and we will see you on the next one.
See ya.
All right, bro.